Hi, welcome back to Digital Defense, Bloomberg's weekly cybersecurity web show. I'm Jordan Robertson, a cybersecurity reporter with Bloomberg News in our Washington, D.C. bureau. As always, this is an interactive show, so we want you to send any questions you have to any of the accounts you may be watching this on. We're broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, and Twitter, and anywhere you're viewing us. If you want to send in some questions or comments, we're going to try to get to as many of those as we can. This week's topic is Yahoo. We've talked about Yahoo before, and Yahoo is the story that never ends in terms of their breaches. And I'll just catch up, anybody who's watching who has not been following this closely. Yahoo has suffered a series of data breaches as it prepares to sell itself to Verizon for $4.8 billion. Now, these breaches have been progressively worse and worse, and they're not fully resolved. As I say, Yahoo is very close to finishing this deal with Verizon. So the latest the latest news is this that I want to show you. It came out this week that that Yahoo is warning a select group of users that their accounts may be targeted by state-sponsored hackers. Now, if you just read the headline, you won't know that this is actually part of the earlier breaches. It's not a new breach. However, it's an escalation of what was happening in the earlier breach for a specific technical reason I wanted to share after I give some more of this history. So this is the latest example. This is the latest iteration this week. If you're a Yahoo user and you're a journalist or human rights activist or government official or whomever, may be targeted by state-sponsored attackers, you may see one of these Yahoo notices saying your account may have been targeted. Now, this is not the typical kind of alert from a company, because there's a special technical reason why this is significant. Again, the backstory here is in September, Yahoo announced this first phase of this data breach, and that is here. September 22nd, 2016, Yahoo announces at least 500 million accounts were breached in a hacking attack, which the company blamed on a state-sponsored attacker. Interesting point here is that Yahoo said it discovered the breach in 2014, but didn't alert the public until 2016. I've been talking to a lot of cybersecurity experts about what that means. Why would a company wait 2 years? How could they legally wait 2 years before disclosing a breach of this scale? And the answer I've gotten back is actually an interesting one. It's speculation, but for those of you who like geeking out on this stuff, this may be helpful. The answer I got back was, the only way Yahoo's able to not disclose a breach of this scale for that long is if there's a law enforcement reason. So. And the technical explanation may be that if Yahoo has mirror sites for law enforcement, or is doing mirroring of certain accounts for law enforcement, if they disclose this breach and if they proactively change people's passwords, that could lock out law enforcement from accounts of legitimate interest, or it could disrupt that process. Because if you're a bad guy, you're using your Yahoo account, suddenly Yahoo changes it for you. You may leave the service. You may do something else. You may change it back to something different, or add extra security measures if you may have been part of this group. Again, just speculation, but this is the first breach. First breach, again, 2016, that Yahoo discloses. That breach apparently happened in 2014. Fast forward to December, Bloomberg broke the news that there was actually a second data breach, an earlier data breach, and a much bigger data breach. So again, first one that Yahoo discloses, 500 million user accounts stolen. That's half their user base. The second one that they disclosed happened a year earlier, and was 1 billion user accounts. And this story that we wrote, indicated that some of those were very sensitive government employees, because what leaked in these breaches was not just username and password. It was username, password, and backup email address. Really fascinating subject, because some sensitive, some government employees in sensitive positions used their government email address as their backup, NSA.gov, FBI.gov, whatever. And so again, that was the second data breach that Yahoo disclosed, and that led to a whole series of really contentious negotiations with Verizon, because Verizon was going to pay $4.8 billion for Yahoo, primarily for these billion users. And then Yahoo discloses, hey, we lost the account data on all of them, or close to all of them, or potentially more than all of them, because there are users that may have fallen off, since the breach. So what Bloomberg, again, catching anybody up on this history, what Bloomberg reported this week was that Verizon is close to shaving $250 million off the price of this deal because of this breach. This is one of the biggest numbers we've ever seen in the cybersecurity world. You know, Verizon is basically saying this breach will cost Yahoo at least $250 million. And as part of this reporting, it was revealed that Yahoo is also going to share in any potential liability from these breaches with Verizon. So I'll get to the current, the current state of events in just a minute, but I do want to get to some questions here. Thanks for those who are writing in. First question is, has Yahoo seen a significant drop in users because concerned users are deleting their accounts? You know, if they have, they haven't disclosed it. What tends to happen here, and this is an interesting question because, you know, what you would expect after a breach like this is a lot of people would say, well, I'm not going to use that service anymore. That's insecure. Yahoo has been very insecure, more insecure, as far as we can tell, than any of the other major internet email providers. But that's not how people use their email. You know, they may just change their password and kind of move on because so much of your life is wrapped up in it. The more interesting question is, for people who use multiple accounts, do they just kind of leave Yahoo by the wayside and say, this is no longer an account that I'm going to be actively using? That is a more relevant topic because, maybe many people started with Yahoo and then migrated to Gmail, but they kept kind of a, historical account with Yahoo. There's a likelihood that a lot of people just kind of let it go. But it's really not so much about whether users are defecting from Yahoo as it relates to this deal, as the more important question is, what else did the hackers get? Because there's not been a huge decrease in trust for Yahoo. Yahoo's been suffering for a long time. That's why they're selling. The bigger question that's being investigated is, what else did the hackers get? And as was referenced in this story, I think the market has a kind of misconception about the answer to that question. There's a quote in this story from a financial analyst saying, well, the fact that Verizon and Yahoo seem to be approaching the end of this deal and the completion of this deal, that indicates that Yahoo and law enforcement have a handle on what the hackers got. Well, I'm here to tell you that is not the case. Yahoo has been basically stonewalling Congress, and I'll show you a letter here indicating that. Yahoo has been stonewalling Congress, and some senators are really upset that Yahoo canceled a last-minute meeting at the end of January. They've been called to testify. They haven't given complete answers. The senators calling for this investigation are very frustrated. They say so in this public letter. And the FBI is not done with this investigation at all. The FBI is just beginning its investigation. And the real concern for Verizon and for users is, what else did the hackers get beyond just account data? And that will relate back to, what we're about to discuss in a minute. And that issue is far from settled. So if Verizon completes this deal as planned in the next couple of months, they may be inheriting a very different company than they expect if Yahoo's intellectual property, also went out the door. Next question here is, someone on Facebook says he still has there's an old Yahoo email account. He only uses it for emergencies. Should he delete it? If it's only for emergencies, you don't really have a lot to lose by just keeping it. If it's just some backup account, because even if hackers have access to it, they're not likely going to see any meaningful information. So if that's all you use Yahoo for, I would say just keep the account, because it's you're not trafficking in sensitive information. If, however, and this is always the caveat, if you work in a sensitive position, if you are government official, journalist, human rights activist, a person living and working in a repressive regime, in a repressive country, for whom security is a really big deal, and that Yahoo account is a backup for another sensitive account, like a bank account or another email account, there could be security vulnerabilities you might have, if that account, gets emails or gets alerts that allow you to log into other accounts. But if it's just a backup, if another service is down or something, I'd say keep it. But if you're using it to access other sensitive accounts, I would say think hard about that, because again, the extent of these breaches is still not known. Next question here is, don't these hacks just prove that no account is secure, and does it really matter who you have an account with? I like that question because it relates back to the subject that I wanted to get to today, which is this. So a little bit more history. When Google was hacked, a number of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, by the Chinese in China. The attackers got basically some of the crown jewels of Google's network. I mean, they got source code. It was reported that they got information on lawful intercepts, who Google is monitoring, on the demands of U.S. law enforcement. Really, really valuable stuff. Since then, Google famously pulled out of China, and it has gone crazy with its security. Now, no tech company is going to be 100% secure, but from all the signals we've been able to gather, Google is paying people a fortune to do their security. They are hiring some of the best hackers in the world to do reverse engineering on their hardware, on their software, to protect their networks, finding ODAs and exploits and vulnerabilities in other people's software. They've really been, from as far as we can tell, world class, at cybersecurity. Meanwhile, Yahoo chose a different path, and this is borne out by some of the comments by folks who've worked there. Yahoo was in kind of this really difficult financial situation, and they decided we're not going to invest in security. It's pretty clear. When you lose everybody's accounts, when you lose 1 billion people's accounts, twice, you're not investing as much in security as you should be. And so this idea of all the accounts are the same, all the service providers are the same, I would challenge that idea because I'm not here to promote Google or any particular company, but I will say everybody we've talked to has said Google, Facebook, the other major vendors, Apple, they invest a ton of money in security. And it's for this reason. They don't want to be the company like Yahoo that has to go out there and say, I lost 1 billion accounts. But even more interestingly, again, the attackers in this case did not just get account information. They also got source code for how Yahoo generates the cookies on your computer, the small files on your computer that authenticate users. The significance of this is what Yahoo is warning users this week is that not only did we lose your account data that would allow people to log into your account, we also lost the source code information that allows hackers to generate malicious cookies. The significance of that is if you're using things like two-factor authentication, which if you watch this show, you'll know I talk about all the time, which are text message alerts that allow you to know when somebody's trying to log into your account, yourself included. The theft of that source code allows hackers to bypass that security mechanism. They create a malicious cookie, they log in as you. All of these security mechanisms are kind of out the door. This is really the worst thing that could happen in terms of security for your users. So at this point, Yahoo has a really uphill battle in trying to claim that they're at all, on par with what Google and Facebook and Apple and other internet, email providers are doing. This is really about as bad as it gets in terms of, email, internet security. Next question here, is it true that companies aren't disclosing every breach that happens because they don't want their stock to drop? The answer is yes, with a twist. So, as of today, almost every state, if not every state, has a standard data breach disclosure law, and that compels companies that have customers in those states. Which, if you're an internet provider like Yahoo, that means you've got a customer, in every state. It mandates that they disclose breaches when it involves their customers, and they have a short time period, in which to do that. It may be 90 days, it may be 120 days or less. So those are real laws that these companies have to contend with. There's no federal statute to that regard. However, there are exceptions, and the main exception is a national security exemption. So if you suffer a data breach like Yahoo did, you discover it in 2014, the clock starts ticking immediately from the moment you discover this to when you have to disclose it because of all these state laws. So what the companies do is they put out a press release, they file an 8K, they disclose to everybody at once instead of doing state by state. The way you get around that is if you can get the government to tell you, if you disclose this, this will compromise some national security investigation. It's the only way anybody can think of that Yahoo goes 2 years from knowing about its breach in 2014 to disclosing it in 2016, that law enforcement said, hey, you got to keep this private because we're monitoring certain accounts, bad guys who have Yahoo accounts, and if you disclose this, those guys might change their passwords, they might go away because they know that they are now susceptible to hacking. There's really no other way to get around it because, again, these are laws that companies could violate if they chose to, but no self-respecting general counsel will tell a company that's a wise thing to do because it's so obvious in discovery, if there's a shareholder lawsuit, that they did that. It doesn't prevent companies from trying, though. We reported extensively in 2014 and 2015 on a data breach at JP Morgan where the bank was just really motivated, very highly motivated, to try to get a national security letter for this reason, as they didn't want to disclose the breach. They didn't want the stock to be affected. They didn't want lawsuits and regulatory inquiries and things like that. And they lost that battle. The FBI and Secret Service said this was a criminal breach. They were after, kind of account information. It was not a nation-state attack, and they had to disclose it, and it was a really bad deal for them. I mean, they saw a lot of damage from that breach, and there was a lot of money and time spent on remediating it, because it went public. We're getting some good questions here. Is the financial industry doing anything to combat cybercrime? Banks are actually really considered the top of the heap in terms of investing money, being plugged in with law enforcement and the intelligence community to monitor for threats. They've got a very close relationship with U.S. intelligence services. So the banks are doing a ton. The J.P. Morgan example is actually a really great one because the banks are like among the top targets for the most sophisticated hackers. If you're Russia, or you're China, or you're Iran, and you can disrupt the U.S. financial system or make it so that people don't trust the data coming out of a major bank, you can cripple the entire U.S. economy. I mean, you can cripple the financial system in a heartbeat, if you're in the right place. So the banks are really good at this. It doesn't mean they don't get hacked. They get hacked every day. It's all a matter of degree. And that J.P. Morgan example was a really good one because, yeah, they got hacked. The attackers got data on millions of people, but they didn't get what they were probably after, which was access to trading platforms, core security, issues, core security code, the code that runs J.P. Morgan's trading platforms. I mean, things like that. Those are things that they would love to get. They didn't get there, and that's a result of, banks are really hardened against these things. But, that being said, the conventional wisdom is that, lurking inside of any of these organizations are just these kind of silent Trojan horse programs that, expert nation-state hackers have implanted a long time ago and are waiting to activate at some future date. Is two-step verification safe is the next question. In general, yes. In general, you should have two-step verification on all your devices. That means you get a text message alert every time you log in from that device. The reason this Yahoo, latest disclosure is significant, though, is that it's not foolproof. There are two main ways you can compromise two-factor authentication. One, like this, if a hacker can successfully, create a malicious cookie, on your computer. Like if you get the option on your computer to say, from here on out, I don't need the two-factor authentication when I log in from this device, which is a reasonable thing to do. If it's your home computer, your personal cell phone, you've got a password on it, it makes sense that you would click that and say, authenticate me automatically from this particular device every single time. Any other device, send me the alert. If you as a hacker can successfully create that type of malicious cookie that does exactly that, two-factor authentication doesn't matter. And the other way is, and I encourage everybody to do this as well, if you turn on two-factor authentication, that's the first step. The second step is you've got to call your cell phone provider and add two-step authentication there as well. This happened to some Black Lives Matter activists not too long ago, where they were targeted by hackers who called up Verizon and called up their cellular providers, imitated them, and socially engineered the Verizon and other telco customer service reps over the phone to give them access to their accounts, and they redirected those two-step authentication text messages to accounts under the hacker's control. So they were able to access these Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts and all these other sensitive accounts and tweet out things that were just not true, and they were able to spread false information that way. So if you do those two things, though, if you set up two-factor, if you call your wireless carrier and you set up some form of additional authentication there, it may just be an additional passcode, you're pretty well protected. It's not foolproof, and again, if you're the target of a government, a nation state trying to hack you, not a whole lot that anybody can really help you with. It is going to happen, and you can take some best practices to make sure that you are using encryption, you're trying to be as secure as you can. But in general, for most people, you set up those two things, you're good to go. Next question here is, why were there so many breaches with Yahoo? It seems like we don't hear this from Google or Hotmail. It's a very good question. It's not that these other companies are not attacked. And again, it's not that these other companies don't lose data too. I mean, Google, again, lost source code in, I think, 2009. Hotmail, I'm sure, is attacked all the time as well. Some of this is a function of who discovers it. Yahoo in this case, the FBI alerts Yahoo to these breaches. I mean, that's the way many companies learn about them. at that point, the clock starts ticking. So if the breach is so bad that and so widespread that law enforcement is able to pick up on this through monitoring network traffic, it's just the last call you want to get. Is from the FBI saying, "Hey, you've got a really bad data breach." And Yahoo, again, judging on the comments and testimony from people who used to work there, they said Yahoo was suffering financially, and like many businesses that suffer financially, they've got to decide where to deploy their resources. Again, they were not a broke company; they were just struggling, and they decided, according to these former employees, not to invest in security, and or not to invest nearly as much as their peers. And you got to remember about Hotmail. Yes, Hotmail is a legacy email service. It's not considered one of the the more modern email providers. However, Yahoo is protected by Microsoft, and Microsoft used to be known as a really vulnerable platform, and it is. It's the most widely used in the world. Yahoo has really stepped up its game in the last decade, I'd say. Again, they have very close ties to U.S. law enforcement, U.S. intelligence officials, and they're very, very hardened, and they take security very, very seriously these days. So you can imagine that security extends to their platforms like Hotmail, like Skype, like things like that. But again, no platform's 100% secure. Last question here. How does it all impact Marissa Mayer, if it does in any way? It's a huge impact, and this is a really good question because, Marissa Mayer was brought on board from Google as kind of like the star employee, the star from Google. She was brought over to Yahoo to turn the company around. When she couldn't stop the slide of Yahoo, she was forced to sell the company and forced to sell it to Verizon. She is desperately trying to get this deal done, before these investigations conclude. And it's my sense and my impression that that's why Yahoo is slow walking Congress on this. There's no reason not to not brief Congress if the investigation is complete. If it's complete, it's complete, and you go testify about it. But we know for a fact that the FBI has not completed its investigation. We know for a fact that Yahoo has not completed their investigation. So it is in Marissa's strong best interest to complete this sale, because the problem becomes they shop themselves out there a lot, and this was the best deal they could get. If this deal falls apart, Marissa's in deep trouble, because this is the best buyer they were going to get. Again, we wanted to thank, that's it for this week. We want to thank everybody who's watched, sending questions. As always, I'm happy to take questions offline as well. Feel free to tweet at me. My Twitter is @JordanR1000, JORDANR1000, or you can send me an email. My email address is there. We love getting the questions. We love having you watch. As always, we hope it's helpful and informative. And we will see you next week. And thanks again to everybody for watching.